So I forget, did we have a topic for today? Well,
Yeah, I'm sorry I only posted it today.
that's all right.
Got it. All right.
What is the role of
Okay, yeah. So what is the role of art and culture in society? So that's the topic for tonight. And we're gonna have our little discussion here. So what do you guys think? And by the way, we can start with this conversation, and then if you guys want to talk about something else later on, we can also switch topics. But the first topic that we're going to tackle, at least it's this one. What is the role of art and culture in society? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
It has one.
All right, so that's a start. So what's the role of art and culture in society, David?
It's a good question because it's not immediately obvious how it helps us, I guess, survive or thrive. But yeah, we do it. So it seems that there has to be a reason for it. I guess art and culture. So art encompasses many things, right? There's like actual paintings, there's architecture. I guess I don't know if you would count literature as part of art or movies as part of art.
It is, yeah.
Literature, books, music, movies,
music,
performing arts, you know.
So
yeah, I'm counting it. Yeah, I think you can, because at the end of the day, it's semantics, right? So you can say you can say that it's different things, and that would be okay. You can refer to art as just being painting and sculpture, and maybe some architecture, drawing, but and just visual arts. But I'm the way I was thinking is more in a broad sense. So like David is saying and Raul is saying, yeah, more like in a more broad sense, also encompassing cinema and literature, theater, dance, music, all that.
Yeah.
So I feel like in a way, art, it helps us understand ourselves better. Like when we make a movie, it's usually not a true story, although sometimes it is. But it's fiction that helps us better understand ourselves. And often we can learn lessons from it that we can apply to our actual life. So I feel like that's an important role of art in general.
Occasionally, we learn that the person who made it or people who made a movie are not very good at what they do. But
yeah.
And this doesn't identify the role of art in culture and society, but in my view, no one can adequately define art. At least they never have, to my satisfaction, but to me, art, if you have something that's too chaotic, too bizarre, you have a very, very limited audience. And if you have something that's too predictable, you also have a limited audience. And to me, the secret to successful art is not always, doesn't mean it's good, but popular, rides the line between being too predictable and too chaotic. And the problem is that line is in a different place for every person.
Yeah, and there's a lot of art that's only for artists, really. Like there's some music that only talented musicians really appreciate. There's paintings that really only talented artists appreciate. So it kind of depends what level you're at. But yeah, good art to one person isn't necessarily good to another. But yeah, as far as the role of it, I think it helps us understand ourselves better or process ourselves. Like when we see a painting, it brings certain emotions that we have. Maybe when we see trees, we start to feel relaxed, or we start to notice certain colors make us feel certain ways. And so it kind of helps us process. It's almost kind of like a psychological process that helps us better absorb our world. When we see a really good movie, I guess it just makes us process the world and who we are more. It's kind of my best guess as of right. I don't do art a lot. I've done it a little bit more than I used to. I actually got some art books at Barnes and Noble like a few months ago. Started painting this picture of fish. I got a few other like art books that I did a little bit for fun, but I've never really been a huge artist. So yeah.
No, but you're a consumer.
I'm a
You
consumer.
you listen to music, you read books, you go to the movies.
Mhm.
All of those
Yeah.
are art, forms of art.
I listen to music a lot.
Oh.
I usually listen to music while I'm working. So yeah.
I don't know. You guys may not remember Joni Mitchell. She was a performing a folk rock singer, and then she became a jazz singer, and she's very good. And one time in concert, she said she also paints, and she vacillates from making music to painting. And one time she told the audience, she said, the difference between being a painter and being a performing artist is that nobody ever said to Van Gogh, paint a starry night again, man.
Yeah, it's just not appreciated as much.
Yeah. that has to be annoying, you know, like I bet that's really annoying, because imagine these like in some cases it's kind of like preposterous, because you know you have like the Rolling Stones, right? And they've been making music for like 50 years. And imagine you've been making music for 50 years, and then you give this big concert and people want to listen to a song that you wrote 40 years ago, like 4 decades ago. You're basically a different person, and people don't care what you just did, like how you just spent the last 40 years. They just want to listen to your, you know, old classics. And that must be so annoying. Imagine that.
We saw one of those PBS concerts. It was James Taylor, and he was very good. And he started into a song, and he was singing "You Got a Friend," and he interrupted himself with the opening guitar thing. And he says, "You know, I really like this song, but I didn't know I was going to have to sing it every day for the rest of my life."
Yeah, it's almost like a curse, you know. You make this thing and then you can never get away from it, you know. Even I bet in the beginning it's nice, but after 40 years, 30, 40 years,
he made a gazillion dollars off that song.
So Raul, we lost you for a second, but we're just basically like laughing around a little bit. It wasn't anything important that you missed. We're just talking about how these you know, these performers, the musicians that they have these songs, and they have like decades long careers, but people just want to listen to the same songs again and again and again, and that get old.
You
So
know,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing I find really interesting is that people want to listen to a sad song. So same with art. People want to see art that makes them feel sad, or maybe lonely, or maybe some other unpleasant feeling like angry. Because even though it makes you feel an emotion that's negative, for some reason you still value it, because it's like it's telling you something about yourself, I guess. I think that's why. Why do we like sad songs?
Maybe that's what's wrong with me. I understand what you're talking about, and occasionally I gravitate towards that. But I
Yeah.
also like things that inspire me.
Yeah,
You know,
both. Yeah, no, we don't just want sad songs. I guess people want art that reflects all the different human emotions, right? We don't just want art that always makes us happy or always makes us excited, right? We want art that makes us feel the whole spectrum.
you can't have a top without a bottom.
Right.
Yeah, but why? Like, why would we want sad art? Like why not just like what do we get out of sad music or sad art? Obviously, we're getting something out of it, or people wouldn't do it, right?
Well,
Well, what Aristotle said is that you get catharsis, but I still don't understand what that means. And I would think in terms of, I think people just like variety. I think the human being gets bored easily, and like, for example, why would you want to go to a movie that would just scare the bejesus out of you?
Yeah.
But you just want to feel it, and you want to feel it in a safe way that it's not real, and but you don't want to be feeling that way, getting that sensation every day, the rest of your life. But maybe we look for it just to feel alive. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just gonna say, yeah, I think what you said, like you can feel something, but it's safe,
Right.
like it's a safe environment, and I think that's I think that might be the answer to your question. I think that's a very good question, Michael. But and a good answer by Rule. I think it has something to do with the fact that you can explore that emotion,
Right.
but you're not totally vulnerable like you would be in normal life. But like the horror movie is a good example, right? That's an extreme example. You don't want to be killed by like a crazy homicidal maniac, but it's okay if you're watching it, right? Because it doesn't really have consequences at the end of the day. So it's still an interesting thrill, but even like something a little bit more nuanced, like feeling sad. We don't particularly enjoy feeling sad, but if you're watching, I'm not sure how to put it, but I guess like if you're watching, in a sense, it's like if you're watching someone else in a movie be in a sad situation, it's almost like you can explore that emotion from the outside, right? I'm not sure like exactly what it is, but that's part of it, I think.
Again, without any consequences, any real consequences.
And I think by exploring it, it kind of helps you deal with it when it actually does come about. Like, I wonder if there's some kind of psychological benefit. Like, if you watch a really sad movie about like a breakup, then you've kind of experienced that emotion. What do you call it? Via some other person, via the person in the movie. So if you actually go through a breakup, then you kind of know more what to expect, right? Or you can manage it better, maybe. I don't know. It's just kind
of or perhaps the other way around, in the sense that maybe you already went through a bad breakup, right? And then you watch the movie and it's not pleasant, but at the same time, you are given an opportunity to explore that emotion, and that is satisfying, even though you don't particularly like being sad, but you like the opportunity of exploring that emotion. And
if it's well written and well acted and directed and so forth, if you have recently gone through that kind of turmoil or trauma or whatever, then you might understand some subtleties that the writers tried to get through. I don't know.
So but why do we like to explore? I guess we like to explore emotions because it helps us I guess when we understand ourselves better, then we can, I guess, better make decisions in life, right?
Yeah.
Like we're more prepared for what comes our way, I guess. Maybe that's what art does.
Well, let me
Yeah.
just let me connect that actually, because the first question that you asked, Michael, I think is connected to that, right? In a sense, because you're asking like, why do we do it, right? Why do we create the
Yeah.
art? And is it a way? I think that's the most. I came up with some questions here. That was actually the question that you asked is actually my favorite question, which is like, is art some in some way a way of making sense of things, and that's why we do it. That's why that's its main purpose, and that's connected to the fact that the emotion side, maybe we're trying to make sense of those emotions. That's why we appreciate it in art, because we're not directly impacted by them, but at the same time we're feeling them, right? And we're
Right.
somehow processing them in a different way.
I would, I would go even beyond, and there's a theory, for example, in evolution, that we, by nature, it's an adaptive trait to want to test limits of our emotional feeling, and art is one way to do it, because the species or the population that has that somehow that it just built into their genes that they want to test it. Maybe it's novelty seeking, maybe it's you just need constant emotional simulation. Then when the real thing happens, when the real emotional crisis happens, then you are better prepared for it, because you've rehearsed it in under a safer set of circumstances. And there's some merit to that, for example, if you watch sad movies, and then when something sad happens to you, you're not bowled over, or you're not thrown for a loop, but at least you went through the motions, you understand how to deal with it, or at least how to cope with it. So in a sense, that's the art is not from a rational, the enjoyment or the love of art is not from a rational view that, oh, I want to do this so that it will help me. But people who naturally explore the limits of their emotions are better equipped and are more adaptive than those who did. So
it's interesting. It's like it sounds like it's like a workout for your emotions. So like when you go to the gym, you work out your muscles, right?
Right.
Like
right.
And your muscles get stronger. When you look at art, you're kind of working out your emotions. Something's happening psychologically.
Yeah.
And I don't really know.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
I don't
you're
know
not
if we fully understand. I don't know if we fully understand really what art does, but it does something. It's like it works out your emotions.
Right. In the same way that researchers on stress say that, stress is not all bad for not just for people, but for animals. That, like, the one that's really harmful is this chronic stress, of something hanging over your head that just daily, pecks at your brain. But the kind of stress that we get from, for example, playing competitive sports, or maybe the stress from running away from a perceived threat, that's not something that's bad. That's actually an adaptive trait. Go ahead, David.
One of the things that concerns me along those lines, and this is likely, I think what I'm getting ready to drive at is how art impacts culture and society. And I'm thinking in particular about movies, but movies. Have you ever noticed that the storylines that you typically see in movies, which I see too and enjoy, uh, oftentimes, perhaps too often, involve people who solve their problems with fists and guns
Yeah,
rather than discussion.
right.
And it's not that there's never a time for that, but I think that it's out of proportion. It's and the difficulty with being out of proportion is that um, you don't want to eat McDonald's French fries every day because that's going to be bad for you, and you shouldn't consume violent movies every chance you get. The same way you shouldn't eat French fries. And I think our society they are voracious consumers of movies that depict people solving their problems with guns and fists.
Mhm.
That's just my
Yeah.
opinion. And I think that's bad for us.
Yeah, yeah. I think the research is showing that the desensitization is shows up in research on uh, voracious video game consumers, and who knows? Of course, the video game companies will say no, that's not true, and they'll come up with their own research. But you tend to think, if you're playing video games, a lot of for a big proportion of your waking time, that is video games are part of your environment. And if anyone who says that what goes on in our environment doesn't affect the way we think, I think I'd say, yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, I think that that it definitely has an influence. I think what people tend to react negatively against is the notion that video games are the cause behind, like violence, for example, in society, which is what something that historically, when video games first came out in the 90s, when they became prevalent,
Yeah,
lawmakers started using that as a scapegoat, and that's certainly not
right,
true,
right. I
But-
don't
but
think the direct
Every new
connection is there.
technology since 1900 has corrupted the young.
right. So that was just a case of like pretty like a clear scapegoating
Yeah.
at the time, because people are not really dealing with the real issues. But a completely different discussion is, does this have some sort of impact in the way people perceive things if they play video game, if they grow up playing video games and shooting things on a screen? I mean, that's a different discussion. That's certainly, of course, it has an impact, right? It has to have an impact. Everything that we do has an impact of some sort. And if you
Right.
do that repeatedly, of course, that's going to have some sort of effect. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think, David, my answer to, I think partially why we do those violent things is because violence is fun if you're not like actively engaging with it in real life. Like it's almost like this is all comes down to sort of like how our brain is wired in a sense, because it's like when
Right.
there's a fight in high school, like everybody wants to watch the fight, right? People don't want necessarily to partake in the fight, because you can get punched in the face. People don't especially like getting punched in the face, but everybody's usually interested in watching the fight, right? So we don't want to be in the middle of, gunfight, but we kind of like to watch it, so it's, I think somehow we're wired in this way that we just like
Right.
to watch
Yeah,
violence. at
no,
least.
not just violence, but just stimulation. I think the brain seeks stimulation, because and emotions, different types of emotions are certainly stimulating. You know, to feel fear once in a while, to fear
So-
sadness
so-
once in a while.
So violence would be one form of stimulation. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
And
I think
there
so.
are
The
others as
thrill
well.
from
Yeah.
violence is very stimulating. You know, I'll
Yeah.
go back. Can I go back to about? I think the most reasonable thing somebody said about the portrayal of violence in art and video games, movies, and performing arts, or that type, is that it's not like a person will become prone to violence from watching it. It's more like the people who are already prone to violence, to be more violent, might be more readily tipped over the edge. I think that's one of the more reasonable statements about it. It's not like if you watch a movie about serial killer, then suddenly you just might turn into a serial killer. It's more like it might further trigger or tip people over the edge if they already are, in danger of being that.
Well,
anyway, yeah.
That reminds me of 13 Reasons Why, which is that show on Netflix, which was about teenage suicide. And there's actually, I don't know how accurate this is, but that's the last thing I read about it, that there has been like an increase in teenage suicide after those seasons aired on Netflix.
Right.
So, and
Yeah.
they're one of the most popular TV shows in the world. That's one of the most popular TV shows in the world. So huge viewership. And it does seem to have had some sort of impact. It seems it has had some sort of impact
Right.
in the rate of teenage suicide. And that it's what you're saying, right? Maybe it didn't convince people to just go out and commit suicide, but if someone's on the edge and they watch that, and that might be just enough.
Yeah, that's why they stopped doing school assemblies, high school assemblies, whenever one of those students commit suicide. It used to be that schools would hold an assembly, and they would sort of try to mourn, celebrate, and the person who unfortunately felt life wasn't worth going on with. And whenever they do that, then you have these, they call it copycat suicides, but it's not copycat. It's just they've been pushed over the edge. And so high schools don't do that anymore in the States. They don't, quote unquote, not really celebrate, but they don't highlight in an assembly that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's sort of the same way as they try not to give too much. They try not to highlight the person behind these shootings, the mass shootings, because then that gives them a celebrity status almost, right?
Right.
Which is what a lot of them are seeking, and by denying them that, it makes it less appealing.
And in fact, with mass shootings, it's a classic example of what you see on video, on the news, affecting other people's behavior. Because the first mass shooting, if you guys remember, it was at the University of Texas in Austin. And this guy went on top of a tower during a college football game, and started shooting people randomly. But before that, he was telling people that I feel different. I feel, he just felt different, that he's prone to anger and aggression. And then when they did an autopsy on him after he died, he had a tumor that was pushing into his amygdala, amygdala is the center, the heart of the fight or flight instinct. And it was pushing into his amygdala, and that was why he was feeling this sort of irrational aggression. But most of the subsequent mass shooters didn't have anything like that going on. But the example, first one, seeding ones, was
when was that one? When did that one take place? The
I
first
think
That
one?
was in the
this-
60s.
yeah.
Wow, all the way back. Wow. I
all
didn't.
the way back to the 60s.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't know it was that old. Yeah,
yeah.
I kind of thought that Columbine was the first one, to be honest.
No. In fact, the tower shooting at the University of Texas in Austin was not the first.
Oh.
Maybe the first in the modern era, but
First,
it was not
yeah,
the first.
yeah. But the first, I mean, in that classic lone gunman, then that got publicized.
But you know, I don't think that any form of art is necessarily causal to make people violent, you know,
No.
or video game. And I'm not even remotely suggesting that less of that be made or none. I'm just saying that I think that the depiction of violence in movies is a little out of proportion to
Right.
reality, and
Right.
that is not good for us,
No.
in my opinion.
Is it not good? So if it doesn't make us, if it doesn't cause us to do more of it, and we like watching it, is it bad just because it's not
Well,
thoughtful, or like we're not
let me-
using our minds?
Let me put it this way, and this is not necessarily only about violence in movies, but to me, my observation is, and I don't know what anybody else thinks. I only know what I think. But to me, our culture has extreme difficulty telling the difference between celebrity and greatness.
Yeah.
It's getting worse. And I don't know what the causes of that are, but
Right.
if we have large groups of people that only consume stories where people solve their problems with fists and guns, that's probably not good. They need to see somebody who negotiates, like Bridge of Spies. I don't know if you guys saw that movie. It's Tom Hanks,
Right.
based on a true story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I've seen that.
he didn't
Yeah.
shoot his
Mhm.
opponents. He spoke to them.
Right.
He outwitted them in repartee, you know, and I think that is much more interesting
Right.
than somebody backed into a corner and the only way they can get out of it is to shoot.
Yeah. Shoot himself out. Now, the counterpoint to that is some would argue back then, you know, don't blame art, the movies or whatever. We are not a cause. We are just a symptom.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not even remotely suggesting that no more movies be made with violence.
Right.
You know,
If,
I'm just
if
saying
this-
it's a little out of proportion.
Yeah, it's an indicator that they're, you know, saying don't blame us if these movies are popular. It's not because of us that it's popular. It's because it's what society looks for.
Well,
a lot of people.
I
So,
guess one way of saying is that we're just holding a mirror up to society.
exactly. Yeah.
But in my opinion, oftentimes it's a funhouse mirror. It doesn't really show you what reality is really like. Because you know what? I have never seen anybody be shot and killed in real life. I've never seen that. And maybe you guys have. Maybe a lot of people have, but I never have.
No, I haven't.
Well, that's a good thing. I'm glad you haven't. I haven't either, so that's a good thing. Well, I mean, that raises the question of, you know, is it? It's a popular question, right? Is it a violent society produces violent art, or the other way around, that violent art produces a violent society, you know? And maybe it's both.
It's
It's not
both. I think
necessarily
it's
mutually
both.
exclusive.
Yeah, yeah. You know, like I think like everything else in the world, it's whether, you know, whenever you say is it nature or nurture, well, it's actually both. There's some features of nature, some features of nurture, and the same thing with art. That it they do try to reflect the world, but as David said, well, maybe use a different mirror once in a while, or aim the mirror somewhere else once in a while.
So yeah, it's interesting. Like, so I feel like art is very closely connected with narrative in general. Like we as humans just like stories. And I don't think there's another animal that's really like that. But I remember, and I'm not like a huge Jordan Peterson fan. I find some things he says interesting, but I'm not like, but he did say one interesting thing. He said like children will beg you to tell a story. Like children love to hear stories. And so there's something about that just inherent in being a human that we like that narrative.
Let's Ritam, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So welcome to the discussion. Ritam
Hello.
is joining us. Everybody knows Ritam, right? Do you know everybody, Ritam?
I think so. I'm from the phone, so I don't see everyone. I can just see you. But
Okay.
It's all right.
yeah, I was in Trader Joe's when you texted me.
Trader Joe's.
I just started going there. I love Trader Joe's.
I just
I'm
started going there as well.
I've
Yeah.
never been to Trader Joe's. What's so great about it?
Cheap wine,
Cheap wine. That's a
Yeah,
good reason to
cheap.
go, I guess.
cheap beer.
It's healthier too. It's cheaper and healthier. So it's a win-win.
They
Is it
have
even-
great
Healthy
prepackaged
beer.
food.
They have what food?
Prepackaged food.
Prepackaged food. That's not very
Yeah.
healthy. I think Michael,
I
you're
mean-
telling me something that is not true.
No, it's pre-packaged, but they pay closer attention to the ingredients in it. They try to use more organic stuff. You know, they try not to have as many preservatives and all that. So I feel like it's better than the alternate. If you're gonna get pre-packaged, it's the better of the pre-packaged, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But is this like
Yes.
prepackaged stuff? Is like microwave stuff?
Yeah.
You're talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Frozen.
That's not very
Or-
healthy. This
or
microwave. stuff.
English pub food, frozen English pub food.
Why is it
Yeah.
not healthy?
I mean, everything that you already get ready and that you have to microwave tends to not be the healthiest food.
And unless you pay attention specially to make it use less preservatives and
Right.
stuff like that.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You don't buy it.
you know when there was I have a friend who was holding up a bottle of wine and says, "This wine is great. It doesn't have any preservatives in it. Alcohol is a preservative."
Alcohol.
It's all preservative.
It's a great I mean, it's wine. Actually, you know, it lasts a long time. It lasts a lot more time
Right.
than most foods.
Yeah.
I mean, how long can a bottle of wine last? Actually, that's a good question. How long does it turn until does it take until it turns into vinegar or something?
It depends how much oxygen gets to it while it's
Like,
being
let's say, like in ideal
you know, while
circumstances.
it's in storage.
In ideal circumstances, how long does it take?
10 years easily,
Maybe more.
I think
and
more.
more. But some wines will deteriorate after.
But
10
you
or
know those
years, but-
giant pottery storage containers, amphora or something like
Yeah.
that. They found a bunch of
On a ship.
those on a sunken ship,
Yeah.
and some of them still had wine in them.
But you'd probably
don't think
die if
anyone-
you had
I
that
don't think
wine.
anyone has tried it though.
I don't think anybody drank it, but it smells all
Yeah.
right.
But they
Nobody volunteer for the experiment.
yeah. There's still a difference between toxicity and drinkability. So
Well, isn't there?
they're probably not toxic.
Don't you need to have like good wine for it to last? Doesn't it change? Like good wine can last for many years, and bad wine you just can't do that.
Right. You have to have a higher tannin content and acidity for it to be something that you can keep in the cellar for years and years.
It's not like you
Because
can
that's-
just buy that supermarket wine and just keep it
No.
for 10 years and say, well, this is fine wine now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna resell it.
No.
Doesn't work that way. So Ritam, tell us, let's get you into the conversation. Give us your thoughts on, the role of art and culture in society, or just, you don't need to give us a speech if you don't want to, but is there a particular aspect of that question that interests you?
Any question? No, I don't have a question right now on the top of my head. But I think art and
Or something
culture-
that you want to say. It doesn't need to be a question, something that you want to say about it.
Yeah, I think art and culture is reflective of the time of the society that we are living through. That's what I think. So it's a very good, in a way, to understand what the society or how the society is like, in a sense, at that time period.
So that's
Or at
very
that
interesting. Yeah, we
era.
hadn't touched on that.
So, yeah, I mean, in terms of literature or movies, those kind of things. I mean, anything's basically, you get a sense of the time, and it's a good piece of history to go back and check what was happening.
Yeah.
I also find art particularly interesting from time to time, coming from places where freedom of expression is not absolute. So artists always find different kind of ways to
Right.
say what they want to say. I don't know. I mean, in a particular example, I was thinking today, movies that come out from Iran, they have this very peculiar way of giving the message. So the storytellers always would tell their story, and the medium is also there. Just the way they're expressing themselves is different from a way someone else would express themselves. So yeah, but it's very powerful.
Yeah, I confess I've never seen a movie from Iran. Have you seen some movies from Iran? Or have you guys?
I haven't, but there's one or two that got critically acclaimed for the past few years. But it's in like Cannes and the other non-Hollywood movie venues or whatever you call it, markets. But
Yeah, they're pretty good. Also, I mean, the Arab movies, there was a Arab Film Festival last weekend. So very interesting. If you get to watch some of the stuff, it's pretty interesting, to say the least. And it also kind of reflects, that's what I was saying, that reflects the region, reflects what the people of that region, what the people of that time is actually going through. So yeah, it's kind of a mirror or a window to a part of the society that we might not know of.
And that connects in a way to what Michael was pointing out, that art is a way of telling stories, even when it's not just about the story, but yeah, I agree, Michael. I mean, it always kind of tells something. It tells a story, tells a narrative. Like when we see these caveman paintings, right? It's not just paintings, really. I mean, there's an element of storytelling there. They're
Right.
kind of like talking about their life. They're talking about their times,
Yeah.
and that's not very different from a movie, telling, which is also telling sort of a story of society in the 20th century, right? It's kind of the same, a different technology.
You know, and the fascinating thing about these cave paintings is that everywhere in the world, it's not just in Europe, but they in South America, in Colombia, I think they found this whole cliffside just full of rock paintings, and also in Southeast Asia and Sumatra. So these are places all over the world, and I don't think they've ever had long distance communication at the time. But
Yeah, I don't think so.
the handprint is like in all of them. You know, it's maybe it's just part of the human psyche to say, you know, this is me, and here's my handprint. They all have the handprints in there of presumably the artists, and whoever. And that's just fascinating. It points to some sort of commonality among all of Homo sapiens in the way we think, in the way we express ourselves, in the way we say, you know, I have just, this is something I have to say, and this is me. Here's my mark.
Maybe the handprint was a way to say Leroy was here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You know, exactly. But yeah. And yeah, I mean, the need to express oneself, I think, is universal for all people. Uh, and to me, that is, in a nutshell, what art is. This is what I think. This is what I feel, and I want you to know about it. That's probably the commonality. You put something down because you wanted to express something, maybe something that's not even narrative, just an emotion.
There's a universality that is true about art, like you're saying. But at the same time, it also, like Rita was saying, right? It is specific sometimes. The specific art is specific to a certain society. So both things are true, and also it kind of raises the question. I don't know if it's a very good question, but if art is specific to human beings, and if Craig were here, he would probably say that it's not. But you know, I think there's you can say that art is specific to human beings because other animals don't seem to really engage in that.
Right.
Maybe you need a certain level of sophistication as a species to pursue that.
Yeah.
And I don't think machines can necessarily do it either.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the question is, what is art? If you think of art is to something that would invoke emotion in you, then machines might be able to tap into that. Machines might be able to, or algorithm might be able to invoke human emotions with time. Like if you listen to a certain type of music and that music gets you into a certain type of zone or a vibe, or get you into a space, I think there is a possibility that with a powerful algorithm, that algorithm can understand the state of the mind and can drive you in that state of mind. Because ultimately it's like some sort of like I think how are we going to perceive art physically as well? Like that would be the question of machine coming into the play. Like what kind of hormone secretion is happening, all those kind of things. And if machines are, if there's a way of understanding that, then machines can tap into it and create something similar.
Yeah, they can create. So my point of view is that machines can probably be able to figure out what it is that triggers emotional responses in sentient beings,
which is totally unlike anything we do.
Yeah, but whether a machine would have the, you know, for art, and to me is a two-part thing. It's what the person or entity who created it wanted to express, and you know, and what the person who views it or listens to it feels. I suppose it has those two parts. It's something I kind of took in from our previous, that time we talked about it.
Yeah, we had the this conversation, yeah, and but do you think Ritam, that would still be true if you consider the fact that and this is kind of like where I'm at, the artist, well, the computer can sort of like mimic what a person would do, and can the way it's programmed, maybe it can decipher some of the
Yeah.
things that you must do to
It's
elicit
simulated.
emotion. Yeah, but it's still a simulation, and I think that for it to be like real art, the artist needs to be expressing like a particular emotion that,
Right.
well, equates to a human emotion.
Yeah.
And the computer cannot do that. What the computer is doing is a different process altogether, because the computer is just really mimicking something else, but it's
Does
not
it though?
expressing its own
I don't
emotion.
know, like if the computer, or quote unquote AI that we all think is would have the thinking or power of originality. So an artist is different from a machine, because what is artist creating has some sort of originality, right? That's not the mimic part that might be coming in. Although there is another theory of like everything is essentially a mimicry, which is a totally different branch of maybe philosophy. But anyway, so if an artist is coming and creating something original, like would that AI be able to create or not? I don't know much about AI to comment it, but I've heard stories like AI can make a painting or AI can make music, but I don't know how far.
Yeah.
it's
I,
gone.
I'm not able to figure out who AlphaGo was mimicking when AlphaGo made a move that Go Masters thought was a mistake, and it wasn't. Who was AlphaGo mimicking?
No,
Is it the chess
Yeah.
one?
no,
Well, similar.
That's a good question.
no, and it's not about mimicry. I think it's about expression. About art has to come from a feeling. If you're making art, it has to come from a feeling. You have to know that this piece of art that you're looking at was when it was being made, it came out of feeling, even a feeling of I feel nothing right now. I feel so nihilistic that this is what I think it looks like. In the same way that if a robot tells you, I really love you, that doesn't mean anything to you, right? That's not going to trigger any sort of
Well, that's a good example, because when a robot
genuine
tells,
emotion.
yeah, and when a robot tells you "I love you," maybe it will learn how to do it very convincingly, right?
Yeah,
So it will sound just like a human, and you know,
right.
imagine it's a good-looking robot, like in Blade
Yeah.
Runner.
Yeah.
You might actually believe it, but the difference between that robot and let's say a robot girl, like in Blade Runner, and a real woman, is that a real woman will actually feel it, right?
Right.
She might be lying
but
too, but let's presume that she's saying the truth.
yeah, but in Blade Runner, caution, Blade Runner, they are not robots. They actually are, So I just
maybe
I'm
a
not
better
going to get into
example.
that, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
I guess what confuses me is the idea that the test of humanness is emotion. I don't understand that, because to my knowledge, the areas of our brain that have an impact on our thinking at an emotional level are the same brain structures that are in virtually all mammals. So the thing that is different about human beings as opposed to all other mammals is that we have a thicker neocortex, and there's not any emotion there. So it confuses me why emotion is often viewed as the sign that something is human.
Well, let's put it this way. You can argue that mammals do have those emotions, but I was bringing up the emotion aspect in comparison to robots, right? Not other mammals. If we are comparing ourselves to mammals, then
That's
yes,
only
I
where
mean,
it
you're
comes
absolutely
into,
right.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
a
that's where
robot
it
does
comes
not
into play
does
only
not have
emotions when,
those
yeah.
characteristics.
So
comparing
you're
humans to
saying
robots.
you're saying then that a machine that creates doesn't really create.
It creates, but it's not art. I wouldn't call it art. It might,
Okay, what is
You know,
different
it-
about the machine as opposed to
Uh,
a human being? What are they doing differently?
they don't feel anything.
Yeah,
There's-
that's what I'm saying. In other
Yeah,
words,
I think-
why is it that feeling is viewed as the pinnacle of humanity? I don't get that. Personally, I
Right.
understand. I understand. I'm in a severe minority with that.
Well, I
Well,
don't
an
know.
animal could
We
create-
would have to take votes to know that if you're in a minority. I
Yeah.
think you might be, but I don't know. I'm not sure because we haven't really heard Michael or Ritam or Carolyn.
Sure.
But I was gonna say, I mean, you could think that animals might be able to create art. So like, yeah, I don't know of a lot of examples, but I could imagine like a monkey creating art or something. I don't think art has to. I don't think human is baked into the definition of art. But I think maybe what Raul is saying is that art, it's not just the object that's created, but it's also the intent behind the creation. Like you could have two paintings and one that are identical, but one's art and the other's not, because one, the person making it had a certain intent, whereas the other maybe it was just like like maybe there has to be an intent for it to be art, but I don't know.
Yeah, it comes down to the question, right? Like you pointed out, is the intent part of it, and there's a different intent, even if the end result is the same. Does the intent itself change if the property, right? If it's art or not? I think
Because we're talking about the artistic whatever value or component, and something can be just totally mechanical and still beautiful, right? We're separating the art component to the aesthetics component, I think. But I agree, something can be beautiful and not be art. Like we go out into nature and see something really, really breathtaking, but it's not technically art. I'm not going to say it's not beautiful looking at a very nice, very pretty sunset or landscape.
This is all kind of
breathtaking.
definitional. I mean, it's just the whole this. So, but yeah, going back to the question, what is the role of art? So we communicate in a bunch of ways. So like language is one way that we communicate, but I'm sure you've all heard like a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I think sometimes what art does is it helps communicate more than just speech can. So if you show a painting a book is communicating with words, but like sometimes by making it visual, it allows us to communicate more than we could just with words.
Sure.
And the origin of language, written language, right? I mean, it was largely associated with images. There are still languages that are based on images, right, instead of just abstract letters. So you can definitely communicate with images. There's a fine line there. It's not necessarily art, but it's certainly, images serve as forms of
Sure.
communication. And
Sure.
but I would say there's probably always a communication component to art, right? Because again, the artist in some ways always trying to communicate something, even if it's a very abstract feeling.
Yeah. I agree with that.
There's always some sort of a message, or even if it's just really just a feeling that the artist is
Right.
somehow trying to communicate.
Yeah, by adding like color and texture and whatever, you're better able to convey a certain emotion than you could just by speech. Yes.
Yeah. It's also like the thing about being able to convey the same sort of emotion through different media is, for example, if you show two pictures to a person, one would be like jagged lines up and down, and one would be just a smooth wavy line, and then you play two different types of music, one that's very, like kind of staccato type, and the other one would be more melodious, smoother melody. People will make you ask them what picture goes with what piece of music, and they will make the quote unquote correct match. The jagged lines will go with the more, dynamic or bombastic piece of music, and the wavy line they'll say, oh, it goes with this one, more smooth and mellow, and so it's expressing the same emotion or impression, but two different media, and so to communicate an emotion or feeling by through different ways.
I remember hearing a story about an artist that had an exhibition, and there was a wealthy, influential person looking at his paintings, and he and the artist were walking through the gallery, and the prospective buyer was looking at a painting, and he said, "Now, what does this mean?" And the artist said, "Well, if I could put it into words, I wouldn't paint."
Mhm. Yeah, I remember you saying that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very true. Like that's a lot of what art is.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of artists will, whenever they're quoted something that a critic says about their work, they say, "Yeah, if that's what he thinks,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll go along with that."
Let's ask Sashir. He just joined us here for our last the last
Yeah.
20 or 30 minutes of our discussion. Sashir, how's it going? You're coming. You're in a stadium right now.
I am,
What-
yeah. I'm
You're
here
watching
in
the
the
Mets or
Astrodome.
something.
Yeah, I'm here in the Astrodome circa 1986.
1986. What happened?
Yeah.
I'm baseball illiterate. So what happened then?
Yeah, I'm here for the Astros Mets playoff game in 1986. So I've time traveled back. So
All right.
I've doing some random time traveling.
So,
Daryl Strawberry.
give us some
Yeah.
give us some of your thoughts about what is the
When
what
you
the
come
role
back
of-
forward in time, skip 2020.
Okay. I will try to.
Suck,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think the role of art and culture is in society, Sashir? Is there a particularly interesting aspect of that question that you would like to kind of like raise or tackle, or a question that you want to pose?
Well, I'm somewhat biased because I guess I'm in kind of quote a creative field, but I mean, art is
Architecture, yes.
right. I'm in architecture, right? But the definition of art and culture is that we've kind of in modern kind of culture we've kind of started separating. We have like high art, low art, middle brow art, stuff like that. Whereas really, if you look at the original work, I mean, we define culture essentially by art, if you think about it.
Right.
The only way we know that, if we look at Neolithic cultures, we can only determine that they existed really because of the art they left. Well, art like post holes, basically where they had their settlements and trash heaps. So I guess there are three things we can. Neolithic is that they had trash heaps and they had shelter and they created art.
And
And
one of them
sometimes
was
all
named
three of those
Leroy.
were the same thing. I mean, if you think about it, we knew that, that there was
Right.
humans who expressed culture in Lascaux 100,000 years ago because they made cave paintings.
Yeah.
And there's even older art now where people are finding marks on rocks that now can like curvy marks that they've determined were created by humans, more than 100,000 years ago, like 120,000 years ago.
So that's really interesting. So do you think that it makes sense to divide, culture and art, and say that some things are higher art and some things are lower art? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I have a similar question, Bruno, on that end as well.
All right, go
So
ahead.
yeah, on the same point, yeah. Do you guys, or do you think about art being good or bad? Do you essentially divide some of the art being good art, something being bad art, like, or art is just art and it's a
Yeah.
form of expression? And
If I do that, I know it's all a matter of taste. I would not say that I would not say that categorically one work of art is better than another work of art. If I say this is good or this is bad, I'm saying I like this and I don't like this. But that doesn't mean that it's is there's anything really meaningful beyond just a matter of taste.
Well, in theory that sounds good, but let me, let's give you like kind of like a tough case, right? Like is say, Rambo 3 equivalent to Apocalypse Now, right? Is that the same sort of thing that we're talking about, or is it very different? Because I think it's very different.
It's different from
Or even more egregious. Let's compare, like the play Hamlet to Captain America: The First Avenger, right? I mean, it's not exactly the same sort of thing that we're
Well, I
talking.
would say Hamlet and Captain America are the same, actually. There were men.
Are they?
Wow.
Well, I kind of like, I need to watch that movie again if they are.
Well, they're
a
not the
lot
same
more-
story, but they're meant for mass appeal.
Yeah.
Shakespeare was writing not for people sitting in ivory towers, not for academics. He was writing for mass appeal. He was the Jerry Bruckheimer of his time.
Mhm.
Yes, but don't you think there is a difference in terms of artistic value between those two things?
And I'm saying, Bruno, that
I'm
artistic
posing the
value-
question, like you get, like my sensibility. I think there probably is a very considerable difference, but I'm not necessarily right, and I'm interested to see like what you guys do with that example. Like,
Right.
do you still think that they're more or less equivalent?
Well, if you look at the Marvel movies, there's a lot of high concepts in the Marvel movies. There's a lot of, I mean, they dress it up with a lot of violence and explosions. But that's, if you look at Hamlet, there's some very deep concept in Hamlet, but there's also, sword fights and
everybody dies.
there's a weird love triangle, or an off and on relationship between Hamlet and Ophelia. I mean, there's a potential Oedipal relationship between Hamlet and his mother. I mean, there's a lot of lowbrow I mean, you look at Romeo and Juliet. I mean, Romeo and Juliet sword fights. It had pretend sex, not because they couldn't really. Standards were very different then, but still, it was meant to be titillating.
Yes, but the quality, it's supposed to be entertaining. I get it. It's an interesting way of putting it, but the quality of the language and the quality of the way the plot is structured, it's not. I wouldn't say it's quite the same as just like a Marvel movie and a modern Marvel movie. I think it's not necessarily the same.
Well, I would disagree. I mean, I'm not a huge
disagree?
Marvel fan, but I don't mind Marvel movies. But like let's say, okay, Captain America. Well, yeah, I guess I can't remember how many there are now. The one with the Winter Soldier.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Like
I mean, they're Captain America.
either one.
Our protagonist is betrayed by a long lost friend, who's actually ends up used by someone for revenge. And during this story, he has to discover the truth of his friend's existence. And there's, I mean, it is a classic Shakespearean plot. It is basically Hamlet is visited by the ghost of his father, who tells him he has to avenge him, but Hamlet has to find the truth about that to expose his uncle.
Right.
Well, both
And then there's
of
a
them
big
have
bloody sword fight, a poisoning at the end. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, Shakespeare is a very potboiler writer in a sense. Like he was a writer for masses. So, I mean, that's for sure. But my questioning was a little different. Like, not only that, like, would you grade certain arts even as offensive, or would you even say in that case, no, this is art, and the beauty of the art is on the eye of the beholder? Or would you go and say, no, I don't like this art, and I think this is not good art because this is starting to offend some people?
well, there is art that's deliberately designed to offend.
That's
I mean,
that's
it's
meant to offend. Yeah.
meant to arouse strong emotions.
And and might not be successful in terms of the impact it has. It wasn't what the artist was aiming at, but yeah, just artists can be lots of things.
So even if the art is very provocative and not, in someone's view, not constructive to the society, still, I mean, under the freedom of speech or something like that, the art should stay. It should not be like banned, or it should not go away.
Ideally, but society isn't perfect. I mean, if some people are just so offended by it, and they're gonna cause riots and cause harm, and sometimes expediency is just it's not worth it. Gotta balance things. Go ahead, David.
I recall a story about Gary Trudeau. He wrote, he did a comic strip for many, many years, Bloomsbury. And he was receiving an award, and he had to make a speech. And this was shortly after the murders at Charlie Hebdo. The people who published the pictures of or drawings of Muhammad. And in that speech, he talked about how lowbrow, or that Charlie Hebdo was punching down to the little guy. So, and what confuses me is that somebody who printed cartoons was punching down and taking advantage of other people who came in and murdered half the staff. I don't get that. That doesn't make sense to me. So the whether or not something is offensive is completely in the minds of the viewer or the hearer or the seer or whatever, the consumer. To me, may not be to you guys.
I think what Trudeau was saying, that making cartoons Muhammad's an easy target. It's very easy to offend. And I think that might have been what he was saying, that you're punching down because it's an easy target to do it. But I vaguely remember that, but I don't think he was necessarily he certainly wasn't justifying the murder of the people at Charlie Hebdo, but I think he was saying it was.
The way I interpreted it, which could be wrong, but the way I interpreted it was that he didn't realize that he was siding with the wrong people.
I think I'd have to go back and listen to it. I vaguely remember that when it came out. I think his point was merely that it's easy to make. I mean, it's easy because people get so worked up about, because essentially the radical Islamists make it easy to make fun of Muhammad because they get so worked up about it. It's like people making fun of, the the Westboro Baptist, a group that go and protest, funerals because they say they hate gays. I mean, it's an easy target to make fun of them because they make it easy. But it's easy to get them worked up too because they make it easy. I
think you misunderstood my point, but that's all right.
Okay.
Trying to answer your question, Ritam. But the problem with your question, not the problem with your question, but just bad art, like you defined it, right? Art that is offensive. I mean, that's kind of like a property of art historically. I mean, a lot of art has been offensive to some people. And so I don't think we can rule out art that is offensive as necessarily bad, because satire, for example,
say not offensive,
that's
like
a very, very long tradition.
Controversial.
Controversial. Yeah. So in a sense that shows you that something is valuable as an art, as a piece of art, right? Because it's raising questions. If it makes you think. It's touching on something that is relevant to people. So I think sometimes that can be actually something that indicates that something is actually valuable. But maybe that's a different question. But I do think that there's art that can elevate a society and art that can just be not particularly useful for society, right? So
I'm gonna head out, but I'll see you guys next time.
Yep. See you later, Michael.
Okay. See you, Michael.
Hey, Michael. Hey, sorry you don't live here anymore. I'm putting together a martial arts and philosophy night in the dojo. So you're not here, boys.
All right. So like an online thing?
No, this is an actual thing. It's at one of the places I train at. They're willing to host it. So.
Interesting. Cool. Sounds fun.
Yeah. Sorry you're not here. Otherwise you could.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. Have a good one.
No, have a good night, Michael.
See you, Michael.
See you, Michael. So yeah. Do you guys wanna end it here, or do you want to go on for 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, or should we end it here?
You can do maybe closing remarks if anyone has.
Sure. Yeah.
Remarks. Because I have one. That. Yeah. I mean, the question is, what is the role of art in society, right? And my answer is necessary, but not sufficient. It's certainly, I can conceive of society being better if, for example, we prohibited or banned art or decided that it's not that worth spending some resources on it. It's fascinating that the people we think of as the smartest people in the world, Einstein, Feynman, all of them, if you ask them, is it important? All of them would say, yes, it is, and they would not want art be something that is not, given as much attention or support as we generally do. They generally would oppose any movement to cut funding for the arts in schools and society.
Well, you're raising a
That's,
point.
that's my
Yeah, you're raising an interesting point. Do you think there can be civilization as such without art, without culture? Is it,
probably
or is
not.
it a central requirement of
I-
civilization?
Probably, just from the very beginning when the the people
So
started making cave paintings. I kind of think there's one I say a lot to people. It's science and technology helps us move mountains, and arts and the humanities tells us which ones. That's sort of my point of view on that.
yeah, well, what do you guys think? Maybe we can end sort of with this kind of this question, like what do you guys think is what's how important is it for civilization, art and culture? Is it really like a key thing, a key requirement, or not?
Well, I came in late, so I've got a lot to say, but maybe I'll hold mine till the end. So I came in late.
I've heard something before, like some people might look at, think artists shouldn't be compensated that much, but like, could you go a month without art, like without background music in stores, for example? You would notice a difference if it wasn't there.
Yeah, that's a thought-provoking thing.
Good point.
Right, yeah,
A
could
lot.
you survive without art?
Yeah, because a lot of the things that we take for granted now as things that are what make our lives blessed.
I think the person could survive, certainly.
Yeah,
I think a person could certainly without art, but the question is, can I ultimately survive without any sort of art?
So like, the person could survive, but their existence would be less enhanced, I
Right.
guess.
yeah.
Would it still be civilized, I guess?
Would it be pleasant at the very least?
Because I mean, physically survive, certainly it's possible. You can survive even without people, like Robinson Crusoe, right? And well, that was actually based on a true story. I forgot now the name of the real person.
Yeah.
But
Selkirk.
you can survive with no people. That's not a problem. Well, it's kind of a problem, but you can do it. Let alone without art. But can a civilization survive without art? I think that's a more difficult to answer.
Yeah, to me, art is part of civilization.
Right.
It's like saying, can you have a pizza without crust?
Yes, they do. They make
probably
pizza that
can't,
goes all
right?
the way to the edge now.
I'm not sure you can have pizza without crust.
You can have like
How
a
can you
Detroit
have
style
pizza without
pizza.
crust? That would
I
that would
I
be
do
a
not
pizza.
want to watch you eat that.
There's Detroit style pizza that is like it's like crustless. Cheese goes all the way to the edge.
I think pizza without crust is not a pizza anymore. Right.
Right. I think that would be a pizza, just like a civilization without art, any sort of art
Yeah.
would sort of be a non-civilization.
It's not a civilization. It's something, you know, if it somehow, you know, because that means you can't even entertain yourself. If there's no art, it's inconceivable how you separate.
Yeah, I think I don't think art. I mean, civilization can exist without art, and art is essentially part of the history. So if art goes away, then we don't have any history.
That's
Right.
to actually access that society afterwards.
Right. Yeah. I would say, I would go further and say that civilization is actually defined by art, not just civilization, but humanity. What it means to be human is actually, I would almost say, to create art. It's again, going back to the cave paintings, is the only way we could determine that these people actually had culture was because they made cave paintings. I mean, we could find like remains of bones and seeds that they'd eaten. That's fine. We knew they ate. We knew they hunted, and they hunted animals and they gathered fruit, but that doesn't tell us that they have culture until we started seeing that, oh, they're making cave paintings.
Right.
One of the big anthropological debates is that it looks like Neanderthals made art too, and therefore Neanderthals weren't just, beasts, but they were actually much more similar. They were humans. They were much similar to us than we like to believe because they actually made art.
Yeah. Neanderthals have been much maligned.
Right. Yeah. They've gotten a bad name.
Yeah.
But I'll say this also. It's kind of an interesting part is that the ancient Greeks thought of art as medicine. And at the Asclepian in Greece, were like the world's first, well, it might not have been the first, but essentially an ancient medical center.
Yeah.
They had a theater at Epidaure. And part of that was that they considered theater as art, or they consider theater as medicine.
Mhm.
And the way they looked at it was that theater was meant to arouse strong emotions. And the idea was that you could, if you had some sort of, emotional problem, by watching
Right.
theater, you would be able to excise that.
Sure.
Or by listening to music, you could kind of balance your personality.
Mhm.
I know I feel different if I walked out of a good movie and listen to a good story. Why would that be any different if I were sick?
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
And certainly music, it affects people's state of mind, right? So I think everybody can relate to that, how
Mhm.
music can communicate a certain feeling or emotion.
Right.
And by doing that, it changes what we're feeling.
Right. But another part of, if you look at like ancient culture, is we could talk about, okay, well, they created art. If we don't look at art, like the Clovis culture, they created these very fine arrow points. Yet in some ways you could say that's art also. There's certainly a function to creating a good stone arrow point, but there's an aesthetic to how they did it. And if you look at most kind of hunter-gatherer societies or nomadic, they might not they might not live in permanent dwellings or anything, but they still create art. They'll decorate.
Yeah. They always made more ornamentation than what was necessary for the function that like the arrowhead was made for. So
Yeah, and I mean there is a connection between art and war, right? Because if you look at stuff like the Odyssey and especially the Iliad, that's kind of like a foundational work of Western civilization, Western art, and that's really about war. It's a commemoration of at least perhaps not so much war, but the values that are associated with the warrior.
Right.
And on the other hand, you look at a sword, right? Like a Viking sword, for example, belonging to a Viking leader, right? And it's not so simple, there's ornamentation. The same goes for any kind of like developed culture, right? There's especially the big leaders, they always had like an artistic form of weaponry, because there is a connection, right, between one thing and the other, like the exaltation of war and art, they go hand in hand.
Right. And that's not surprising that warfare and art has historically it's been a strong link, because what other human activities have emotions as heightened as
Exactly.
in warfare?
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know,
And
so
also
art-
death, right? It's very
Right.
much connected to death, because when you go to
Yeah.
battle, there's a chance you're actually going
Sure.
to the afterworld, right?
Yeah,
Afterlife.
exactly.
So
That's why emotions are just so heightened in warfare, and so want to express it.
Right, but it's not just tools of war. I mean, humans decorated pots.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean,
but
pretty-
we were
pretty
only
much
talking
every-
about how.
Right, everything humans have made at some point they've decorated. I mean, if you think about it coming today, if we look at cars, I mean, we don't drive. People like there's an aesthetic to an automobile. Otherwise, we don't all just drive the cheapest car possible.
No.
We kind of like
Yeah.
certain things about how our car looks.
Because you're expressing something about yourself. That's why you choose a certain car. The more intimate you view the object, the more you want, it to be the more it is a part of your identity, the more you want it to be beautiful, or something you'd want to reflect on yourself, that you want people to know about you. And that's art.
certainly. Anyways, let's end it here. At least I'll end the podcast here. I think we had a good conversation, and thanks for listening. We'll be back soon enough. We'll be back next week, and thank you guys for